Welcome back to another reading and correcting. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, I am doing chapter 73 of The Captain's Heart. Jimmy called up the time on his tablet as the volume of the crowd ahead of him increased. The quartermaster's message indicated the hour for when he should be at the eatery in Kelsir time, and fortunately, once at the station, local time didn't override ship time, just added a field with the extra clock. The Federation worked on a clock of 9 hours, each being 243 minutes. He had no idea how long a Federation minute was, but he'd been able to tell it wasn't the same as a Kelsirian one. He pulled his friend aside. Praetiros, tell the others I'm off to check something on my own. That's too loud for me. He looked concerned. Are you sure you don't want to watch the match? They have a hunter team from the Rogteter Claws taking on a group of Shimbarian. It's going to be ballad worthy. The game of capture, the way Thurk and Pertiros had explained it to him, consisted in taking over the enemy's territory by defeating each of the guardians left there, while the rest of them went about capturing yours. It reminded him of the game of capture the flag he and his friends had played as kids, except for having multiple flags. It was popular among hunters and civilians, both as a sport to watch and participate in. I'm not much for that level of violence, even on screen. Are you going to be okay on your own? I know Federal Eyes, and I have a station map on my tablet. I'll see you and the others on the ship. He stepped away before his friend added anything. Well, the message hadn't included a come alone clause, but the location and time, the fact the quartermasters wanted to meet him off ship felt like something he didn't want witnesses to. Or maybe something he shouldn't go to without a lot of them to ensure the men behaved. Still, he'd been surprisingly well behaved the few interactions they'd had since he'd given him the Scotch recipe, and Jeremy wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. The eatery was much like the one on the... This feels like it should have a scene break. The eatery was much like the one on the previous station, a giant room with table and people of all species. This felt more varied from the other... Although this felt more varied from the other station. They were still within Kelsirian territory, at the border of theirs and the Reo Sefs. Okay, I think I'm going to have to fix that somewhere. I've mixed it up. But this was one of the administrative station, Gralgiran told him. So saw most of the Federation species frequenting it. Would make finding a specific lone Kelsirian more difficult. They didn't understand why the guy hadn't just... The thoughts fizzled away as he saw people sitting at the table. Humans. 3 of them. He had an instant of panic that they were here looking for him to bring him back to Earth. That's capitalized. So they could fix him. Then the absurdity of the thought struck him. They couldn't be here for him. They'd have to know he'd be here, and he hadn't known they were where here was until they'd arrived. He'd known they were dropping off the Kersoterans off and that they'd be here for a few days, but he hadn't asked about the where. He'd figured his friends would drag him. To it. Would drag him along. Anyway. Which begged the questions. Why were there humans sitting there, and should he approach them? He looked around for the quartermaster, then got it. They were why he wanted him here. expat, both of them, he said. He hadn't thought he'd missed humans, but... Hi, he said when he was a couple of meters away. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I just... It's been a while since I've seen humans. One of the guy looked ready to bolt before he caught his breath. Who are you? The woman demanded, then shook herself. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make that accusatory, but I really didn't expect to see anyone else from Earth here. I'm technician Jeremy Bradshaw. He paused. Sorry, I've gotten used to how Kelsirian use rank and names. The other man chuckled. How about we stop apologizing? I'm George, that's Brandon, and Penelope. Penny, please. You have no idea how tiring it is to have my supervisor utterly refuse to call me anything but Penelope. They're Rosef, and things are one way and one way only with them. She motioned. Why don't you sit, Jeremy? Do you want coffee? They have coffee? He asked, surprised. Brandon grinned. You have no idea. Actually, this would be period and capitalized. I'll be right back. He looked through the menu as he headed for the serving counter. He had to look over it twice because English wasn't one of the language on it, and he had to vocalize the Federalese characters to find those that made out coffee since they didn't have a word for it. It took longer than he'd expected for the cook to go to the back and print it, but he didn't mind the wait. He hadn't had one since before his shift, since drinking on the job wasn't something the engineer approved of, and he kept forgetting to bring the print recipe to use in the alley the alley they took their breaks in. Thank you. The stuff smelled wonderful on his way back, and he froze in place from a sip. The three others watching him registered as just good, as just how good the coffee was. The other three others watching him registered at the same time. How good the coffee was. The taste was cleaner, was the only way he had to describe it. Richer. Without that haze the prince had. Every coffee he'd ever had. They were all grinning at him by the time he sat. Who do I bribe to get this recipe? You can't, Brendan said, grinning. Come on. No one in their right mind holds on to something this good. They put it on the market. They'd get a mint at the stations back Earth. He paused. Back in Earth space. It's not a print recipe, Penelope said, and Jeremy stared. What else can it be? She chuckled. You do know coffee comes from an actual plant, right? Or have they managed to ravage it into non-existence since the last time I was on Earth? Of course I know that. I've had coffee back in my university days. Trust me, you've had prints there too. George said they wouldn't waste the real stuff on students. Jimmy tried to remember if he'd had coffee at his parents'. His dad was a drinker, but his mom didn't like it. He'd started at university to help stay awake while studying. How did they get real coffee all the way here? I thought Earth wasn't allowed to trade with the Federation until they joined. Where there's money to be made, someone will find a way, Brandon said. I happened to mention to Nonmi. I missed the real stuff about a year later, there they were, handing me a coffee and telling me if it measured up to my memories. He raised his cup. Did it ever? This place had it since. Since it's just the three of us and we're guaranteed customers, they keep the price on the higher side of reasonable. He glanced at his bracelet. He didn't even know how to go about checking how much he'd paid. If you don't mind me asking. Penelope said, what are you doing on the Kelsirian ship? I'm a tech. He'd almost told them he was with Gralgiran, that he was with a man. He swallowed. What are you three doing here? I didn't know there were humans in the Federation already. They aren't, George said, nervously rubbing a silver leaf brooch on his cuff. Not officially, anyway. So how did you end up here, then? Oh, just by falling. Ouch! Brandon glared at Penelope, rubbing his leg. What's that? What was that for? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because not everyone at the table cares to have their indiscretions spelled out in front of a stranger? She looked at Jeremy. I don't mean to be rude, but we really don't know you. No, I get it. I didn't mean to come across as all inquisition and all that. How about what do you do here instead? I'm a biologist, Penelope said, and the tension at the table lowered. I work with the Rayosef Xenobiology Research Institute here, and other than my supervisor, really, my supervisors, okay, that's a possessive, really rigid work ethic. I love it. Lots of different plants pass through here legally and illegally, and I get to study all of them. System analyst, George said. Now, seemingly calm enough, his nervous tick had stopped. Does human information knowledge really carry over to other species? Jeremy asked. Information's information. Once you learn the language, it's just about taking what they say apart, building communalities, and working out. um, what they mean. It's mostly administrative stuff. My team leads a Garan I call Bruce because there's no way I'm managing her full name. She doesn't mind. Garan? I don't think I've heard that species before. Carciterons, Brenton said. The same way we call ourselves human, but the Federation calls us Earthers. Social relation is what they call my job. I don't happen to be one of the lucky ones with the kind of skills that translates, but I have a knack for handling people. Jeremy choked on his coffee and Brandon grinned. See, I'm that good. You are so paying for that later, George said between coughing fit. Brandon ushers official visitors around. Penelope said, make sure that their quarters are to their satisfaction. You usually see Saladins doing that, which is why this asshole fits in so nicely with them, George said. The little Jeremy knew about the Saladins was that their skin shifted with their emotions and that they were easily flustered. Not what he'd think of as good for people managing. So there had to be more to their species. You say you're a technician, Jer, Brenda said. You don't mind if I call? Actually, I do. It's personal. Please use my full name. The man grinned. Going native on us? What? No, I'm not. He took a breath. I've got the news to how Kelsirian use their names. And while I'm not going to demand you use my full one with rank, that short is, it's for people that matter to me. He forced a smile, and as Penny said, we don't really know each other. Fair enough. How long are you on the station? A few days. We're dropping off passengers, and the captain felt the officers needed a break, and that means us working folks get one too. Kersitaran? Sorry, Kersitaran. Brandon asked, then continued. A bunch of names showed up a few days ago without an attached ship. That doesn't happen often with them. Really attached to their ship they are. The look he gave Jeremy was speculative, and he had no idea how to respond. No one had said if the ship was the Viper's Bane here or the Brave Traveler. It was probably only the hunters who had to watch what they said. Civilians wouldn't know anything about that side of the ship, which meant we must have picked them up at our previous stop. I didn't know they were there until a friend told me it was why we were stopping. I'm just a tech, and it's not like they tell us all that much unless it relates to the work I do. And what is the work you do? Penelope asked, glaring at Brandon. Power system supervision. I've worked on reactor and they said to him, and he realized what he'd said. Wasn't like there were a lot of antimatter techs on Earth. He was careful about what he said. They had a problem uh, with theirs and needed extra hands. So I was already familiar with some of them when I got in trouble with the commander and they took me in, and I was still on the ship when they left. I can't go back. Brenner raised his cup. Welcome to the club, he said with more jovialness than Jeremy expected. But it wasn't like he knew the guy's situation. Maybe, like him, being away from Earth was better. I fell in with the wrong crowd, Penelope said, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I evaded the authorities long enough to sneak on a ship, then jumped from ship to ship until I was caught, but got lucky. The captain was understanding, and instead of returning me to Earth, she passed me along to a Federation ship, and I was able to find asylum here. That's the nice thing about the Federation, George said. They're good about giving even people from species that haven't joined yet shelter if you can work and don't cause trouble. It's Also easy to get lost among so many different species. Brennan said, looking smug. Jeremy definitely got the sense they were talking over his head. But it was still good to talk with fellow humans. And that concludes chapter 73 of The Captain's Heart. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is available on Ream Story. And if you are looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.